Good morning. This is the Colorado Energy and Carbon Management Commission. It is February 12th at 9 a.m. This is our normal business agenda. We will start with a roll call.
Commissioner Ackerman, Commissioner Cross,
Present.
Commissioner Mesner,
Here.
Commissioner Oath,
Here.
Commissioner Ray, Commissioner Robbins.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 6 commissioners present.
Right. A couple of them were muted, but we saw thumbs up and or mouse vocalizing we are here. So that's great. Good to see everybody. Start with commissioner comments. This is the part of the agenda if a commissioner has things they want to inform the rest of us and or our stakeholders about. Seeing none, move into consent agenda. Any questions on consent? Seeing none, I would move approval of consent. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda carries. We'll move into our one docket. That's 2407-00164. This is an oil and gas development plan proposed by TEP Rocky Mountain LLC. It is, what's it called? The Federal 1335-299 OGDP. Believe we're going to hear from Mr. Jewell first.
Thank you, Chair Robbins.
And before we get started, it looks like you've got a couple of witnesses. Let's go ahead and get them sworn in.
Sounds great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, folks. I will just go one at a time, ask you each to raise your right hand, state your name, and that you swear to tell the truth. Let's begin with Mr. Kirtland.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Jeff Kirtland, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Tankersley?
My name is Adam Tankersley, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Is that everyone, Mr. Jewell?
It is. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
All right. With that, Mr. Chair, I'll continue.
Please do.
All right. Good morning, Commissioners. Michael Jewell with Jewell Jefferson Natural Resources Law, LLC. On behalf of TEP Rocky Mountain LLC, again, proud to be the largest and most innovative operator in the Piceance Basin. TEP is always grateful for your time and consideration, as we always seem to find ourselves sandwiched amidst a rulemaking or some other pressing action, but we thank you for your diligent time in bifurcating your efforts here today. Speaking of rulemakings, innovation, and the environment, this OGDP cannot be more apropos, maybe a little boring, because we're not here to talk about another large-scale drilling program with sophisticated ALAs and interesting operational maneuvers. Instead, we're at that intersection at the back end of water recycling, the environment writ large, which of course is heavily implied by water reuse, and innovation, where we left off with TEP's last OGDP hearing in October of last year when we rolled out our EFRAC program. So of course, we're talking about injection wells, because even with recycled water, well-used recycled water many times over, all good things do come to an end, but not before they are used and then disposed of properly and correctly and under your rules that avoid, minimize, mitigate those negative externalities. So to that end, we are here, as said before, under docket number 2407-00164. We're calling it the Fed 1335-299 OGDP, which seeks your approval, among associated other things, for 4 underground injection control or UIC wells that will be developed on an approximate 6.215 acre surface location, which comprises the entirety of this OGDP. This acreage is largely new dirt, about 97.6% or 6 acres. That's kind of new for TEP, as you know. However, the location is precisely where you might want such an operation to be located. At Township 2 South, Range 99 west of the 6th Principal Meridian, is in straddling lands within sections 34 and 35 in Rio Blanco County. It's near the crossroads of Rio Blanco County Roads 70 and 86. It's about 22 miles southeast of Rangeley and 33 miles southwest of Meeker. The lands are predominantly inhabited by grazing cattle and the occasional licensed hunter. And as you're accustomed to seeing from TEP, I'm joined today by Mr. Jeff Kirtland, the regulatory manager for Terra. He will go into the details of this application from the forms and technical standpoint and be available to address any questions you might have concerning the application after this initial summary. And also Adam Tankersley, TEP's planning manager. He'll contribute significant color to TEP's planning processes, particularly as it relates to wildlife interfacing, and of course will be available for questions as well. But before that, we thank your staff, particularly Ginger Malashauskas and the rest of the ECMC technical staff for their insights and feedback, because none of this gets this far without their insight and detailed analysis. So we formally request that you approve an order pursuant to Rules 303 and 503 G1 for an approximate 6.215 acre oil and gas development plan for the development of 4 new UIC wells. 3 of the 4 wells require a federal APD, all of which are in process. Completions operation will utilize pipelines from TEP's existing water management system from the TEP Mott's Ranch multi-well pit. The tanks will be removed after completions, and you've heard us discuss this Mott's Ranch pit before. Despite the new 97.6% of new dirt figure that I stated before, this will be reduced down from the 6.215 total acres figure to a mere 0.72 acres, or just 12% of that total initial footprint after initial reclamation. Pipeline total disturbance will be reduced from 6.4 to just 1.2 acres, or just 18.75% of the total disturbance. These are UIC wells, just injection wells, so no minerals are being developed at all, just for the public's sake. No public comments, either formal or informal, were received, including with an 8-day extension to that time frame. There are no RBUs, high occupancy building units, schools, or childcare facilities within 5,280 feet. We are located in a DIC only for low-income populations over 40%. However, the nearest RBU for that population is 3 miles to the northeast. So with that, I will yield to Mr. Kirtland, who will walk you through the finer points of TEP's signature plan of development before Mr. Tankersley provides more planning and wildlife details before I return to close. Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Jewell, and good morning, commissioners. Again, for the record, my name is Jeff Kirtland, Regulatory Manager for TEP Rocky Mountain, located in the Piceance Basin. We are pleased to bring forward this oil and gas development plan application, which includes the development of 4 new injection wells. As Mr. Jewell stated, this plan supports our need for additional underground injection capacity, which will contribute to our produced water management infrastructure. We've talked a lot about that in our applications over the years, and really these are required to help foster produced water recycling, treatment, and then ultimately our disposal of that produced water. So for background, this OGDP application was submitted on July 11th, 2024. Following review by staff, the application was returned to the operator on October 11th, requesting additional information. And TEP did resubmit that application on October 31st, 2024. The application was then deemed complete by the director on December 5th, and a director's recommendation was issued on January 28th, 2025, leading to today's hearing. Excuse me. As this OGDP does involve 4 new Class 2 injection wells, TEP has also submitted Forms 31 and 33 for each well as required under ECMC's 800 series rules. As you know, commissioners, UIC permitting is an extensive process that evaluates surface and subsurface impacts, requires notice to surface and mineral owners, and includes analyzing geologic, seismic, and aquifer characteristics. Within the permitting process, we look forward to working with your staff, including Nolan Beasley and Elise Devine, who are really great to work with. And really, we want to align the approval of those forms with our development schedule and allow extended time to work around wildlife timing limitations, which you'll hear more about here later. As Mr. Jewell stated, the proposed location is on federal surface and is within high priority habitat. So as is customary, TEP met with both BLM and CPW in the early stages of developing this project. Working with BLM and CPW, the location of these new injection wells was carefully chosen based on several factors. First, the proposed location is in remote Rio Blanco County, as Mr. Jewell mentioned earlier, which is at the western edge of our Ryan Gulch development area. And this is where the subsurface and reservoir characteristics have low pressure and low gas production potential. Excuse me. So this is really the primary location for our northern injection operations because the geology is ideal for our injection wells. Second, the proposed location is near TEP's existing produced water injection facilities. We have pipelines, we have existing injection wells, as I mentioned. And so we can use existing infrastructure and equipment close to this proposed location, including the Mott's Ranch injection facility, which is about 3 miles to the north. Using the existing infrastructure reduces our impacts to the surrounding environments. So that's really why this is an ideal location. But before I turn the presentation over to Mr. Tankersley to discuss high priority habitat and CPW consultation, I again wanted to describe the development and operation of an injection well. Injection wells are drilled in a similar way to producing wells. However, the completions operations do not include a traditional flowback stage, so there's less equipment needed during completions. And the typical permanent equipment you might find at a production pad, such as separators and oil tanks, are not part of the operations of the UIC well. So compared to a multi-well natural gas drilling pad, UIC development is a faster and less impactful process. Additionally, the equipment that's required for an injection well is very minimal. It includes a wellhead, monitoring equipment, and buried pipelines that pump our excess treated and produced water into the wells when needed to balance our water inventory. In this case, water will be pumped, as I mentioned earlier, from Mott's Ranch. The operation is automated, it's monitored at all times, and requires no equipment that emits sound or light. Again, thank you for your time and consideration of this application. I hope what I provided answers some questions that we received earlier. But at this time, I would like to turn the presentation over to Mr. Adams Tankersley, who will provide additional details about our interactions with CPW and the HPH. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kirtland, and thank you to the commission for your time today. As is part of our standard planning process, we engage with CPW early and often to ensure that our development plans are protective of wildlife resources. We go through the full review of the development plan and ensure that it results in the best outcome for wildlife. The Federal 1335-299 oil and gas development plan includes the construction of one new oil and gas location for the development of 4 new injection wells, construction of a new access road for ingress and egress to the location, and installation of 1 permanent produced water pipeline to deliver water to the injection wells during injection operations, as well as 1 10-inch temporary surface pipeline to support completions operations. The total disturbance for the project is 34.246 acres. Of that, there will be 29.028 acres of new surface disturbance. 15% of the total disturbance would be on lands previously disturbed by development activities associated with existing roads and pipelines. The pad, road, and pipeline corridors are located wholly or in part within aquatic sportfish management waters, elk production, and mule deer migration corridor. The Federal 1335-299 pad is located 1,759 feet from the nearest greater sage-grouse general habitat boundary, 1,803 feet from the nearest greater sage-grouse lek site, and 3,935 feet from the nearest greater sage-grouse priority habitat boundary. The development schedule for this location has changed slightly since submittal of the application. Construction activities are still scheduled for July of 2025. Drilling operations were originally scheduled in November through December of 2025. That has been rescheduled for March through May of 2026. Completions operations were originally scheduled from January through February of 2026. That has been rescheduled for July through August of 2026. And then reclamation activities would be delayed until September of 2026 after the wells are completed. That's approximately a 4-month delay in operations from the original schedule. TEP has scheduled construction activities outside of the elk production time limitation during July of 2025. Drilling and completions operations are currently scheduled between March and August of 2026, with a gap between drilling and completions operations to avoid the elk production timing limitation. However, if development activities are delayed, operations may occur during the elk production timing limitation as described in the wildlife plan. We did want to note that BLM has approved the big game habitat conservation for oil and gas management in Colorado as of October 17th, 2024. This has effectively changed the timing limitations on the BLM side to align with the timing limitation recommendations from CPW. A pre-application onsite was held in May of 2022. BLM and CPW were both in attendance for that onsite. The onsite provided valuable information on current conditions in the project area, specifically for the federal 1335-299 and Alternative 1. At the time of the onsite, Alternative 1 was TEP's preferred location. However, through the onsite and review of both locations, 1335 was ultimately selected to minimize impacts to elk, and I'll get into that in a little more detail. We also completed a pre-application consultation meeting with CPW and BLM on February 14th of 2024. During this meeting, we ran through the updated plan of development for the 1335, including all construction activities and facilities required to operate the injection well. We also reviewed potential wildlife impacts to elk and mule deer, which primarily included timing of activities, habitat loss, noise, light, and traffic impacts. We also reviewed impacts to aquatic wildlife due to the location of the 1335 being in the drainage bottom. Primarily there, we reviewed stormwater controls and erosion control measures to ensure that there would be no downstream impacts to aquatic wildlife. We also reviewed the alternative location analysis, which included 3 alternatives. 2 of the alternatives were located on the ridge line to the northwest of the 1335-299 location. 1 was located to the northeast of the 1335-299. No alternatives no alternatives would avoid elk production or elk mule deer migration corridors. Alternative 1 was initially TEP's preferred location, but through the initial onsite, it was determined that that was valuable elk habitat, and relocation of that location to the valley bottom was preferred. The 1335, located inside of aquatic sportfish management waters. This ultimately got removed during the last round of revisions to the wildlife habitat boundaries in 2024, so that is no longer an issue for this specific location. The federal 1335-299 minimizes impacts to elk, mule deer due to the location of the drainage bottom, which hides activities from the adjacent ridgeline. This is a great example of how an ALA and early consultation with CPW improves development outcomes. In addition to that, we also reviewed compensatory mitigation. Specifically for direct impacts, we will be paying a indirect impact fee of $33,541.22, an indirect impact fee of $102,738.30, as well as a seasonal TL fee of $77,053.73. The direct and indirect impact fee will be paid prior to construction as required by ECMC rules. The seasonal TL fee will be paid prior to operations, which may occur during the elk production. EP will also be consulting with BLM and CPW prior to operations within the TL to ensure that the fee aligns with planned activities. In total, the mitigation fee would be $213,333.28, which includes the seasonal TL fee. We also reviewed noise and light impacts. TEP ensured that all of our operations, drilling completions operations, as well as long-term production operations, would be compliant with ECMC noise and light standards. CPW did not identify any potential issues with noise and light for this specific location, as long as the 400 series regs were adhered to. So, one other item that we did discuss were all the best management practices outlined in the wildlife plan. I won't go through each one of them today, but wanted to provide just some commentary on two BMPs, specifically the migratory bird survey requirement for vegetation clearing. We will be adherent to that BMP in our wildlife plan as required by ECMC rule. Also wanted to point out that during the technical review process, one additional BMP was added for the elk production TL. While this was discussed and documented in the wildlife plan, it was not listed specifically as BMP on the wildlife plan. So this BMP basically states that TEP will avoid high intensity activities from May 15th to June 30th annually. And if these activities are scheduled to occur, then TEP will consult with CPW and BLM prior to conducting those activities. We'll also remit additional commissary mitigation, which aligns with the seasonal TL fee in the wildlife plan, and submit a Form 4 sundry documenting consultation and commissary mitigation. And we will also submit a TL exception request to BLM and receive approval of that TL exception request prior to operations. With that, I will hand it back to Mr. Jewell.
Thank you, team. Mr. Chair, with your permission, I'll turn it back over to you and the commissioners, having nothing further. Thank you again for your time and consideration. We welcome your questions and guidance on this application, as always.
Very good. Thank you very much for the presentation. Commissioners, the panel is open for questions. Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the presentation today. And I appreciate you addressing some of my questions that were sent in as well. I appreciate, especially Mr. Kirtland, thank you for briefly discussing the technical assessments and criteria that come into consideration when selecting UIC sites. Just one kind of broad question for you in your operations with regard to UIC sites. In your assessment of subsurface geology, does the subsurface geology alone provide for a wide opportunity for UIC sites, or are those UIC sites somewhat confined associated with the subsurface geology in the northwest part of the state?
Thank you, Commissioner Ackerman, for the question. I'm not a geologist, so I'll rely on the information that our geologist has shared with us regarding our development planning. Again, as I mentioned, when we're planning for UIC locations, we're looking for geology that has low production potential and typically has low pressure. Without getting into the weeds too far, there's a lot of variables that go into permitting an injection well in terms of the injection pressure that can be allowed for to ensure that we're not overpressuring the reservoir, and so there's a lot of variables that go into that analysis. What we find is that at the edge of the basin, and again, the Piceance Basin is effectively a bowl, where the deepest portion of that bowl is where the most productive reservoir is located. And so that's within the center of the valley where the majority of our production is located. At the edge of the valley, as the bowl uprises and uplifts, you're seeing less production potential. And so it's within those areas that we tend to look in our development area for where it makes sense to locate these injection facilities primarily. So So that may have gone a little beyond your question a bit, but wanted just to give you the background of how we look at that from a geologic and from a planning perspective. But in addition to that, we're looking for where, again, in this case, where we have existing infrastructure, existing pipelines, because if you go beyond the edges of our infrastructure, the amount of disturbance required to add new pipelines, add new locations, add new wells, can be more of an impact to habitat. And I will say that in this area, when you certainly look at the map on COGIS, for example, and you look at the wildlife layers, this area is effectively covered in HPH. And so to avoid that is very difficult, which is why we work so closely with BLM and CPW to mitigate those impacts as well. So again, probably a broad answer to a broad question. Hope I got to the answer you were looking for.
You did. Thank you. I appreciate it, Mr. Kirtland. And Mr. Chair, I don't have any further questions for the operator, but probably need some counsel from AAG Mercer at some point as to whether or not the high intensity activity BMP needs to be added as a COA as part of this application.
Okay. I think we've given that direction to Ms. Mercer-Gilman, and she can ponder on that while we see if there are any other questions for the panel from other commissioners. All right, I'm not seeing further questions. AAG Mercer-Gilman, can you visualize? Good morning. Did you hear the
Good
question,
morning.
Commissioner Ackerman?
I think so, but would you mind rephrasing it for me, Commissioner Ackerman?
I will, yes. And sorry, I'm sure I caught you cold, but as part of this consultative process with CPW had a late breaking request for a BMP, specifically that TEP will avoid high intensity activities, e.g. construction, drilling, and completions from May 15th to June 30th annually. My understanding is that would be needed to be added as a COA should we approve this, but I'm not absolutely positive.
Thank you for repeating that. Yes, that should be on the Form 2A as a COA. There is currently on the 2A a BMP. I'm on page 15 of the 2A that says TEP will avoid high intensity activities, e.g. construction, drilling, and completions from May 15th to June 30th annually. If these activities are to occur, then TEP will consult with CPW and BLM prior to conducting these activities, remit additional compensatory mitigation, i.e. seasonal TL fee described in the wildlife mitigation plan or otherwise agreed to through consultation, or complete a project approved by CPW and submit a Form 4 sundry documenting consultation and compensatory mitigation. TEP will also obtain approval from BLM for an exception to the federal timing limitation associated with the elk production area before conducting construction, drilling, or completion activities. So I read that, Commissioner Ackerman, as saying essentially that TEP will strive to avoid those high intensity activities during the timing limitation period, but there is an off-ramp built in that they can do so through consultation with CPW and paying additional mitigation fees. So if it's the commission's desire that it is a firm, no high intensity activities during that period, that BMP would need to be amended on the Form 2A.
Thank you so much for that clarification. And it's my understanding, and the operator can correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's my understanding from my discussions with CPW that they are in agreement with that as currently put in the application. So it wouldn't need to be a separate COA, I understand.
Mr. Jewell, you're nodding affirmatively.
I think that discussion between Ms. Mercer-Gilman and Commissioner Ackerman is correct.
All right. Further questions of the applicant? Seeing none, we move into deliberation. Does anyone care to initiate deliberation, Commissioner Ackerman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You beat me to it. A question I always ask myself 100% of the time when I see a development taking place in high priority habitat is there an opportunity to move the site entirely outside of high priority habitat? I know that I'm not alone in asking that question. I know that many operators ask themselves that question, and I certainly know that CPW considers that question as well. And while I'm not a geologist either, I do understand that UIC sites are generally somewhat more flexible than mineral development sites. Nonetheless, there are constraints, as I appreciate Mr. Kirtland pointing out. Wildlife, as Mr. Kirtland also pointed out, HPH is very widespread in the northwest part of the state. And the original proposed site did cause concerns to both CPW and BLM. As was laid out here, TPW worked together with those entities to ensure a site was selected that was less impactful to wildlife. And CPW's general practice is to raise a concern when it feels a proposal may be too impactful for wildlife, as they did in this circumstance with the original site on the ridge. And then upon working with an operator to address site concerns, CPW, if it believes that development can take place even within HPH as allowed under the basis and purpose statement of the mission change rulemaking. And if CPW believes that it can take place within HPH, there is leeway for it to do so. And then CPW works together with an operator, as it has done here, to then ensure that timing limitations and other BMPs are in place to minimize impact to wildlife. I agree with Mr. Tankersley that this is an example of how an ALA is useful and how early consultation with CPW can be beneficial to wildlife. I think the consultative process worked here, and I appreciate the presentation. I'm in favor of this application.
Thank you, Commissioner Ackerman. Any further deliberative thoughts? Commissioner Ackerman, can I take your being in favor of the application as a motion to approve?
Yes, please.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the application signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Jewell, Mr. Kirtland, Mr. Tankersley. Thanks to our staff for the work behind the scenes getting us to this place. With that, that concludes our business of the day. I would move to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll see everybody shortly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, commissioners.